Hey everybody, another GMG review. Today I am taking a look at Sludge from Sutter, my buddy that I have long been collaborating with, and the author of such great games as Relic Blade, and the owner, operator, and one-man show of Metal King Studios. So, what are we looking at here? Well, we're looking at Blaster Volume 3 because this is our games anthology that collects rules from different systems, a variety of different games, and basically gave myself, Mike Hutchinson, Joe McCullough, and Sean Sutter, Joseph McGuire, a sort of like playground to publish things in. And this was our lockdown edition, which means that it is twice the size of our previous issues. 120 pages of rules for Gaslands, Gamma Wolves. This is not a test, and Ranges of Shadow Deep / Frostgrave, but this deserved a GMG review in and of itself because this was the vehicle that Sean used to publish Sludge. So what is Sludge? It is a miniatures agnostic black powder up to maybe early trench war, World War I, sort of like fantasy, dark, doom, metal game. So with like a doom and horror theme, Sean got super creative, and as one of his sort of like lockdown projects to keep himself sane, just designed a game from the ground up. It kind of burgeoned out of his desire to like build some models he never really intended to play with, like historical models and horror models and stuff like that, bodged them together and create his own game. And just sort of as like a proviso at the beginning of this, obviously I do have a vested interest in Blaster because I am contributing to it, and so there's a slight amount of like, I don't want to say conflict of interest, but like I have something in here too, but I really want to support Sean with Sludge. I think it's a great game. I'm excited to build stuff for it. I'll be building stuff for it all weekend. And so I wanted to review the game itself, and it just happens to be in here. So I'm not going to go too much into our other projects, except to kind of talk about what else is in here. So Shadowgrave 2, the second half of Shadowgrave, which is the mythos / horror rules for Ranges of Shadow Deep and Frostgrave that works for both. Gaslands Legacy, which is Mike Hutchinson's legacy narrative campaign rules for playing Gaslands. Gamma Wolves Ronin, which expands the rules for Ronin teams in Gamma Wolves, adds paths and new ways to sort of like expand and grow your abilities. And then the Mysterious Anomalies of Site X, which is Joey's sort of like stalker style adventures in This Is Not a Test, with like weird dimensional rifts and gravitational forces, and if you ever read the Southern Reach trilogy, that kind of a thing. And so I'm going to jump right into Sludge. And what is Sludge? Well, like I said, this is a horror-themed game, and so it is a dark age of sludge and doom as this endless war kind of rages on. And Sludge is a war game designed to be played building grim fantasy miniatures using various historical armies. The rules are designed to represent a black powder with an emphasis on powerful knights and dark magic. Battle-hardened line infantry will form the backbone of your force. These core troops will be supported by noble knights and strange magicians. Sludge is an invitation to collect and convert an army of delightful ahistorical setting and brutal and distinct playstyle. So what do you need? Models, 28mm miniatures. There's a variety of awesome black powder miniatures available for everyone from Warlord Games to Perry Miniatures. I'm actually using Warlord World War II because I'm doing like a trench war thing with like a theme in like Viking knights and Teutonic knights and stuff. I'm doing a very like grim, almost like World War I kind of theme. It uses dice, d10s and d6s, measuring tools in inches, a 4x4 play area, but if you're going to play a huge game, a 6x4 table might help. 4x4 should be fine, up to 400 points, which 350 is like a standard size game, and we'll be starting at 250, so 4x4 will be fine. And then tokens. You need stress and gore tokens, but there could be tokens to mark your abilities that you might need. That'll dictate more on your army composition though, so be prepared to make something to mark like inspiring or musicians and stuff like that. Pre-measuring. Generally, I like battle games without pre-measuring. I'm old-fashioned, but do you like to pre-measure? Then feel free. I like the idea that you're adding a level of sort of like unknown though for cannons and stuff like that. Things like guessing ranges and stuff. But if you want to pre-measure and not be so random, you can. So Sean kind of leaves it up to the player. Miniatures and basing. Sean is a miniature skirmish wargame rules designed to capture the imagination of kit bashers and take advantage of the vast array of historical figures on the market. The setting's pretty flexible, so if players want to push their games deeper into fantasy or pull back into a more historical setting, you can. For example, Sludge is a guns and knights setting, which suits like other things too, like feudal Japanese, stuff like that. You could put it wherever you want. Players are welcome to base their miniatures any way they like. Miniatures can be attached to round or square bases according to taste. Measurements for movement and weapon ranges are always taken from base to base. So it makes sense to use similar bases as your opponent to make sure there's no weird advantages. And then multi-basing. This game includes multi-based figures. For example, line infantry units are composed of multiple 40mm bases with 3 miniatures glued to them. Even though there's 3 miniatures on the base, they're considered to be a single figure. If you have Blackpowder miniatures with 4 figures in a base, they'll still work perfectly. Or you could be using miniatures based individually and just cluster them together. Core rules. All right, 3 phases. The initiative phase, the activation phase, and the nerve phase. So the initiative phase, you roll a d10. The player that rolls highest gets to activate a unit first. Now you have unstoppable momentum and respite. If both players roll the same result, the stakes get even higher. Players can roll off again, but the winner can activate 2 units before their enemy activates. After this burst of initiative, players return to the normal activation going back and forth. Respite, the player with initiative may pass initiative to the other player and remove a stress token instead. If a player has claimed unstoppable momentum, they can remove 2 instead of 1. So basically, I like the idea that there's a actually a result to tying. So many games. How many times have you heard me say to Owen, stop it, when he keeps running the same numbers me over and over again? I love the idea that that creates some kind of a thing in the game. Activation phase. Players take turns activating 1 unit at a time until all units have activated. 1 unit activates all models within their unit are activated and take the same actions or orders together. The vast majority of the game is played during the activation phase, so we'll cover some of the basics. Orders. These are the actions the unit can take during their activation. Each time they activate, a unit can perform 3 short actions or 1 long action and 1 short action. They can be performed in any order. Skill test. Throughout the game, you might be called upon to make a skill test. The controlling player rolls a d10 and adds any bonuses. If the sum meets or exceeds the target number, then it's passed. So it's a TN-based game. And then order types. Orders are given the way that people activate and do things. And there are a bunch of different orders, and what stat you use is dictated by which one you do. So close combat order uses brutality as a bonus. Ranged combat uses cunning as a bonus. Sorcery is arcane. Prayer is faith. And then special, determined by the action. They can be sometimes gaining bonuses for multiple stats. So like you could have a sorcery range combat if you're going to throw like a magic bolt or something like that. Range. Action ranges limit what can be targeted. Ranges are measured in inches and are measured from base to base. And some actions are also determined by line of sight. So number X, the range that you can go in inches. Line of sight has to be in line of sight. Self can only target you. And then self or ally within range can target yourself or somebody else. And then we've got rolling 1s and 10s. Tests are unmodified 1s always succeed and unmodified, tests always fail and unmodified 1 and succeed on a 10. And some actions do have critical effects. Stress. Units are under constant strain to maintain order and perform their grim duty. The horrors and chaos of the battlefield will place stress tokens on them. Units suffer -1 to all tests for every stress token they have. And then free orders. Their special actions can only be performed once per round. Free actions may be performed without using a long or short order. Orders. So short, simple things. Move. You can move 2 inches. Each figure must end move within, they move their movement stat must end within 2 inches of another figure in the unit. So you have a 2-inch coherency. Units may not move within 2 of an enemy unit without performing a charge, and figures may not move through other units. Steady. Perform a test to regain your composure. Units performing the steady order will likely be under stress and will suffer -1 of the test for each stress order. And then focus. The unit spends extra effort on an order. The focus short order combines with another order to increase its success. You get to roll additional d10 and discard the lower result. So you could focus steady if you need to try and drop stress tokens and make your further activations be better. So steady is a prayer, it gets a faith bonus. It's range self, target number 3, remove a stress from self, or 4 gore within 5 inches. So like, remember, if you've got like 5 stress on you, you'd be -5 to the roll, try and beat a TN of 3. So it seems easy to do, and it is when you're not super stressed, but the more stress you get, obviously, the harder it gets. And then critical, on an unmodified 10, you can remove 2 stress from yourself and 8 gore from within 5 inches. Now, gore is the thing that accumulates over the course of the game as units get damaged and causes stress on nearby units. So removing gore is also important. Long orders require 2 actions out of your 3 to perform. So charge, perform a charge order. The controlling player selects a target enemy unit. Each figure moves double its speed towards an enemy miniature in the target unit. The charge move does not need to be in a straight line, and players may use the movement to maximize the number of figures in combat if they wish. If at least 1 figure reaches base to contact, the charge is successful, and the unit can perform 1 of its close combat actions with a +1 bonus to the skill test. If none of the charging figures reach base contact with it, after the charge move, the whole unit moves 3 inches directly away from the enemy and ends its activation. So you have to try and get in range, and if you don't, you get pushed back. And that really would only come into effect if you're not using pre-measuring. If the close combat action is successful, each figure within 2 of the enemy contributes its burst value to the combat pool, and combat is resolved as normal. If the close combat action fails, the charging unit moves 3 inches directly away from the enemy. Its activation ends. So you lose your remaining action, if you had one. Combat. The unit performs one of its close combat actions against an enemy it's locked in combat with. Units are considered locked in combat if they are within 2 of an enemy unit. If a unit in close combat fails a nerve test and suffers stress wounds, they may immediately move 3 inches directly away from the engaging enemies. Units that activate while locked in close combat may fight using one of their close combat weapons. As a long order, the unit may focus on close combat in order to increase the likelihood of success. When a close combat order is executed, the unit must move up to its speed to get the maximum number of figures in base contact with the nearest enemy while maintaining coherency with its own unit. If it fails, the attacking unit moves 3 inches directly away from the enemy and ends its activation. Units may end in close combat with multiple enemies. In the event, the controlling player may break up the combat pool into separate roles for separate units. Any given figure's burst value must be applied to the enemy unit within 2 of them. Ranged attacks may not target units locked in close combat. Units locked in close combat may not use ranged combat orders. So then fire. The unit performs one of its ranged combat actions against a target enemy unit. The firing unit must make the appropriate skill test, and your weapon will tell you what that skill test is. If it's successful, measure the range for each figure to any figure in the target unit. Any figure with line of sight within range of an enemy contribute their burst value to the attack pool, and you resolve the combat as normal. Hold position. Put a hold position token on the unit. If the unit's hold position token's charged, they can remove it to make a range or close combat action. So basically it's like holding an order. Withdraw. Units may make a tactical withdrawal from close combat. Units performing a withdrawal order move double their speed directly away from the engaging enemy unit, but also gain a stress. And then combat action, so a combat test. When a combat action is performed, the unit makes a single skill test to see if the action is successful. The unit rolls 1d10 against the TN for the weapon they're using. If the action is successful, any miniature within range of the target contribute their burst value to the combat pool. If there's only a partial hit, the combat pool is reduced. So determine modifiers. Consider all bonuses for stats and other sources. Subtract all penalties for things like stress. Arrive at the final modifier. Roll. The controlling player rolls a d10 to test against the TN. Remember, if you're focusing, you roll 2 and pick the one you want. If the modified roll eats or exceeds the TN, it's successful. Attack actions have levels of success and critical effects. Partial hits. If the test fails, the burst value of each figure is reduced by 1 for each number the test fails by. If the burst is reduced to 0, the attack totally misses and the target fails. So even if you fail your TN, you might still do damage, but it gets worse, basically. And then critical hits. If the roll is unmodified 10, the attack is critical and each figure gains +1 burst to the attack. And then burst. Burst represents the potential damage of a successful attack. The modified burst value represents how destructive the attack was. Partial hits do less damage and critical hits deal additional damage. Each figure within range contributes its modified burst value to the combat pool. The controlling player rolls a number of d6 equal to the total combat pool, and that's the damage roll. You roll all the dice in the combat pool. The damage roll is added, damage bonus added to each dice. Each damage die that meets or exceeds the target's defense value. Wounds. Damage rolls of 6 always wound and 1s always fail. And then place gore. The player controls the wounded unit, places 1 gore token in contact with the unit for each wound they suffer. The specific rules for placing gore are covered in more detail later. Wounds in excess of a unit's wound capacity still generate gore, so you can be splashed all over the place. And then endurance save and remove casualties. Players who control the wounded unit must make an endurance saving throw by rolling a d6 for each wound they suffer. Wounds are ignored on a 6+, but gore remains in play. The player must then remove a figure from the unit in accordance for each unsaved wound suffered. Some figures, such as line infantry, can suffer multiple wounds for being removed, so I have 3 models on a base usually. Controlling players assign wounds to each figure, and wounds must be completely removed to remove a figure before damaging the next. Figures are wounded but not destroyed should be marked with their remaining health. So like if you have 2 wounds on a unit of like 3 guys, the stand, then there'd be 1 guy remaining basically. Destroyed units. If units completely destroyed, any friendly units that were within 5 of the destroyed unit gain a stress token, even if you're the attacker, because it's freaky, like it's a horror game, right? It's dangerous and deadly. Determine which friendly units were within 5. After rolling endurance saves before removing the destroyed unit, the unit that suffered unsaved wounds must immediately make a nerve test. Units add their faith as a bonus on the nerve test. The TN is equal to or the total number of gore tokens within 5 of the unit. So sorry, the destroyed unit doesn't cause the attacking unit to take stress tokens. It only attacks friendly units do, but you might get them later on for all the gore tokens you've placed. And then basically the maximum TN for a nerve test is 10. If test is successful, the unit can remove 1 stress from themselves and up to 4 gore tokens within 5. If the unit rolls an unmodified 10, they can remove 2 stress and up to 8 gore tokens within 5. If the test fails, the unit gains a stress, After getting stress, the player must check the total stress on the unit. If a total stress on the unit is greater than the unit's wound characteristic, the immediately takes wounds equal to its total stress. Without generating gore or making endurance saves, that's your running away basically. Units that suffered wounds this way lose 1 stress token. Units only suffer stress wounds on a failed nerve test. If a unit gains stress by seeing friendly units get destroyed, they don't immediately suffer any wounds. And fleeing from combat, units are considered locked in combat if they're within 2. If a unit in close combat fails a nerve test and suffers stress wounds, they must immediately move 3 inches away from the engaging enemy. So basically, when you're done fighting, the amount of unsaved wounds they make a nerve, units add their faith as a stat bonus, but the TN is equal to the total number of Gore tokens. So if you've taken like a gajillion Gore tokens, the TN can be super high, up to 10. And then if you fail, you're gonna get a bunch. But you actually get rewarded for succeeding. If you roll 10, you actually remove 2 stress too. So it could be that your unit looks like it's on the ropes and all of a sudden just like rallies and comes back. Sample combat activation. A unit of Imperial Line Infantry activates. It starts a short order move to move into line formation behind a trench wall. And there are different formations you can walk around in that have different bonuses and effects. Unit performs a fire long order to attack of musket volley. It's a TN of 6. The unit is a cunning of 1 and is line formation for a total bonus of +2. They roll a 5 on a D10 for a total of 7, and it's successful. Each figure in that unit that's within range contributes their burst. Models muskets are burst 2, and there's 3 line infantry, so you can roll 6d6. Target unit in line infantry is defense 5, and they gain +1 defense because they're in column formation. Again, that's why the formations matter. The attacking player rolls the combat pool and adds the musket volley +2 damage to each die individually. The enemy would suffer a wound for each die that meets or exceeds their defense, so 4 + 2 = 6, and any wounds of 4+ will wound. The attack deals 5 wounds. So the defending player places 5 Gore tokens in contact with the wounded unit. They then roll 5 endurance saves, and every 6 ignores a wound. 1 endurance save is successful, and the controlling player removes 4 casualties from the unit. Line infantry figures have 3 wounds each. 3 of the casualties remain, and then somebody else is marked on the die as being wounded. The wounded unit then must make a nerve test. There's a TN of 5 because there's 5 Gore, +2 for the musket volley because it's the shock 2 special roll, which is scary basically. Wounded unit is faith 1 as a banner bonus for +2. They roll a 3 and add their bonus for a 5. They don't meet the TN of 7 and they suffer a stress. And the Imperial activation then ends, and the Royal Marines are quick to respond by activating the wounded unit line of sight. They declare they're going to focus and then charge. The attacker moves double their speed and gets into 2 inches. They have a TN7 bayonet, their brutality 1, and their charge for a +2. However, because they're charging across a barrier, they have a stress, they're at -2 as well. So they're not going to get any bonus in the dice roll. Because the attack is focused though, they get to roll an extra 1 and discard 1. They roll a 4 and a 5, the 4 is discarded and they get a 5. So the roll of 5 misses the target number by 2, but it's a partial hit. So the attack is -2 burst. So bayonets normally burst 3, but with a -2 burst, they only contribute 1. You end up rolling with the 3 stands he has a 3d6 to hit. Defending line infantry is defense 5 and bayonets are +2 damage. The roll of 3+ will cause wounds. The attacker rolls a 5, 5, 6 and deals 3 wounds. The defender places 3 Gore in contact with the wounded unit and then rolls 3 endurance saves. The saves all fail and 1 full base of infantry is removed. So they've gone tit for tat basically, but there's tons of Gore around now. The Imperial defenders must take a test. They're within 5 inches of 8 Gore tokens because the 5 that got placed before are in range. So this is where that it gets scary even when you do damage thing, because if you put damage nearby, it's also going to affect your nerve test. That means it is a TN of 8 to try and pass the test. The defenders roll a 6, and with their faith and banner bonus, they meet the TN and pass the nerve test. The Imperial player then removes 4 Gore tokens within 5 inches of the unit that passed the Gore test. They get to pull some off. They get lucky basically and roll high enough that they do it. At the end of the round, the game enters the nerve phase. There's 4 Gore within 5 inches of both the units. The Royal Marines are closer to the 4 Gore clusters and are required to pass a TN4 nerve test. They have 1 faith and a banner for a +2 bonus, but they also have a stress, so they only get +1. They roll a d10, and on a 3+, they can choose to remove a Gore or leave it, so the Imperial players will also have to make a nerve test, which they do. So basically what happens is once at the end of the phase, during the nerve phase, you're going to test to see if you are afraid of all the Gore that's around, and you can choose to remove it or leave it nearby so that your opponent can also have to deal with it. So basically the battlefield gets scarier the more damage you do. And that's the nerve phase. So in the nerve phase, fear and panic sweep across the battlefield, reaping the dark rewards. During the nerve phase, all units within 5 inches of a Gore must pass a nerve check. Players determine the single largest concentration of Gore and randomize between equal concentrations. The unit closest to the concentrated Gore takes the first nerve test, followed by the next closest until all units are required to have done so, do so. As units successfully pass nerve checks, they may remove Gore as normal. They would make it easier for the units to pass their nerve checks. If test is successful, they can remove 1 stress from themselves up to 4 Gore within 5. If the unit rolls an unmodified 10, they remove 2 stress up to 8 Gore tokens within 5, and a roll of 1 always fails. So you get more stressed, or you can remove gore. And here's some of Sean's awesome conversions. You can see these knights with like picks and hammers and rifles and stuff. I'm so excited to convert these models. And then Gore Tokens. They're a 1 inch or 25 millimeter circle representing 1, 4, and 8 gore respectively. And placing gore is kind of like designed to be like the stress of the combatants in the battlefield. There's just guts everywhere, you know, people are screaming. Gore tokens are designed to be placed within 2 inches of the wounded unit. The tokens must be placed in contact with any of the gore tokens currently within 2. So the piles get bigger basically, and you just have them all scattered around. Once placed, gore tokens remain in the position until removed by another game effect. When placing new gore tokens, always place the largest value token, so 1, 4, or 8. If the gore is being added to tokens within 2 of the existing gore, they should be placed in larger values if possible. Gore tokens that are in contact with one another count as total value of the connected gore tokens when determining a TN, even if some of them are connected are within 5 inches. When game effects remove gore from play, the player who performs the game effect may choose any of the gore that's in range. So you can make one pile smaller, or you could leave the big pile and get rid of a smaller pile that's closer to you. And then we got some cool background about the decaying world and how it's like pockets of like world basically being fought over that are still maintained as the world's cracking apart, which is super cool. And I love Sean's art in here. It has a very Planescape vibe to it with like the sepia tones and the white and black line art. I absolutely love it. He did such a good job on this. We've got different terrain rules for the exposed great roots of the trees, barriers, sludge mires and swamps, and forests and thickets. And then battalions. This is how you build an army. So you assemble a battalion. You always get a commander and they're free. Players must include 1 unit of line infantry for every elite unit, and unit sizes are limited by design. However, larger games could have larger units. Increase the unit maximums by 2 for games over 500 points. So 150 is a skirmish, 350 is like an average, 500 plus would be like a huge game. I'm going to start at 250 because I feel like that's a good size for playing quick games to get over the rules and do my like hell and humanity forces for my dark doom metal thing that I'm doing. Unit currency is 2 inches, and then you've got your stats. So here's your name and the type of thing that you are, your speed, how far you move for a move order, brutality, which is like your melee bonus, cunning, which is your shooting bonus, faith is for rallying and stuff like that, arcana is if you have magic, and then your defense, which you have to roll to equal or beat to try and wound you, and then how many wounds you have per stand. Equipment. So you have all kinds of different equipment. So for instance, usually equipment gives you a skill. Unit entries, which weapons the unit's equipped with. Most weapon stats can be found in the main weapon list. Some are special. You have the name, order, so what kind of order it is for you have a special skill. The type, there's 5 action types in Sludge: close, range, prayer, spell, and special ability. And then range, the range denotes the distance in inches. The T I need to hit with it, it's burst. So if it does damage, it'll have a burst. And then damage bonus or effects that it might have. All right, so heroes. Commander's free. He can be based on a 25 to 50 mil base because you can actually make him bigger by giving him upgrades and stuff. So he's speed 4, brutality 2, and everybody gets one of these. It's worth noting that the list in here, what Sean put in the main core rulebook here, is what's available to everybody. So no matter what faction he ends up designing, he's going to end up probably expanding and making different factions for like the royalists and stuff like that and the different like armies. These will be consistent throughout all of them. They might mix and match differently, so some things might become line infantry and others elites or vice versa. But if you build out of this core rulebook, no matter what you decide you want to have later on as he expands the game, it will all work based on this. So this is a very homogenized list of everybody gets like line infantry commanders, chaplains, arcanists, and sorcerers with like artillery, foot knights, mounted knights, stuff like that. It won't matter. Make what you want and then play games. So everybody gets a commander and they're free. Speed 4, brutality 2, cunning 2, so fairly good. Faith 2, arcana 0, defense 6, and 4 wounds. Now you can buy him up to 2 bodyguards for 10 points each, and each bodyguards increase the wounds by 1, so you go to 6, and the knightly arms burst by 2. Bodyguards count as the same figure, and they're modeled in the base usually. Your mount, you know, mount for free. Mounted commanders can only have a single bodyguard. And then battle standards, you get increased move speed to 6. Battle standard is +1 to all nerve tests to all friendly units within 10. The commander himself also benefits from the glorious battle standard. So you get to have +1 to your nerve tests, basically. You have a special skill, which is tough. You're +1 to endurance saves. You save on 5 plus shrug wounds. And then your command abilities are inspire, war cry, close order, go at them, supervise, drill, and heroic speech. So you basically shout at people. They're all special skills. They're short, and long for heroic speech. So basically using 1 action or 2 at the bottom here. And they all use your cunning of 2. Ranges are 10 inches, 5 inches across the board, and 10 inches. So you can inspire and do heroic speeches nearby. And then your target numbers are 5 across the board. So you're trying to roll a die, a d10, add 2, and get a 5+. So you're basically rolling 3+ to pass if you're not stressed and stuff. Inspire removes gore or stress. So you could just inspire 3 times, remove stress, so you keep the troops in line. War Cry, gain +1 burst and its target. So it could be 5 inches, could be anybody. Close order, and you can't do it to yourself either. Close order, get +1 to your next combat order. Go at them, +2 speed for your next charge order. Hold position, which is on a 5-inch, basically get a hold position token. So even after you activate it, you can gain hold position. You can let someone else basically get a free shot or close combat. And then Heroic Speech, remove 3 stress tokens within range. So every pile of gore within 10 would remove 3 stress tokens. Sorry, basically you could, every unit within 10 you could remove up to 3 stress tokens from. So like not 3 from each, but divide the 3 amongst units within 10 and pull them off, which is huge. Arcanists, which are like units of like hedge wizards and stuff. They have like protection spells. You can get +1 damage to your enchanted arms. You could use, and that's target unit, or self-ally within 5. And Thundering Report gets +4 shock on combat actions, makes the nerve test harder to pass at the end of it all. They're also tough. They have Triangulation. Arcanists get +1 Arcana while there's 3 living in your battalion. And you can include up to 3 at 10 points each. So they're all individuals, but they can be activated in the same time. So basically a unit of 3 dudes. But they don't need to be within range of each other, so you can spread them out, which is pretty cool. So they're little hedge wizards, and they boost your guys. Officers, they're like a baby version of the commander. They have Inspire, Close Order, and Heroic Speech. You can also buy bodyguards, they're pretty handy. And they're 20 points, +10 for each bodyguard. And then finally, Chaplains, 20 points, they're a single figure. They don't get any bodyguards get knightly arms for 10 points each. So you could have like a battle like Chaplain. And they get Blessings, which are line of sight, TN5. Target may reroll 1 failed test until the next user's next activation. Sacred Incense, 5-inch range, and it's just TN5. Combat action test against the target unit suffer -1 until the next activation. And Faithful Intercessor, it's a long skill. It's 12-inch range. Friendly units within range may reroll failed nerve tests until the next activation. So that's a really good one to just have as an aura. And then he's also got Tough. And then Sorcerers can cast some spells. Black Fog, line of sight, TN5. Target unit suffers -1 on range combat tests. Visions of Death is a short. Target unit must make a nerve test. Freak them out. And then Horrors of War long. Place 8 Gore Tokens on the battlefield. That one's huge to just spook people. Put them in front of your opponents. So line infantry regiments, we're getting into the nitty gritty of it now. These are the bulk of your forces. And remember, you're going to need to have basically 1-to-1 elites to line infantry units. There's 2 line infantry provided in the game here, and a bunch of cool elite units you can add in. They're represented by multiple miniatures usually on 40 to 50 mil bases, and each base of infantry counts as a single figure. Formations, forming line or forming column. So are you walking in a column or are you walking abreast basically? After move order and once per activation, line infantry figures make a half-inch move directly towards another figure in the unit in order to maintain formation. Units in close combat do not benefit from formations, and terrain features make base contact impossible sometimes. Then you can also make formations impossible. So forming line against +1 to range attacks to the tests. To claim the line formation, all figures must be in base contact and form a line. Draw an imaginary line from any part of the base, the figure to one and the other, and that line must cross over all bases in the unit. Forming column, units of forming column gain +1 defense but suffer -1 to their burst. To claim a column formation, all figures in the unit must be in base contact with at least 2 other figures in the unit. Units that are charged while in combat formation get +1 defense during the initial round of combat, but no longer benefit from column formation while locked in close combat. So think of forming column as like you're in a fantasy style block, and then forming line is just being a long line of just 1 by 1 by 1 by 1. And so line infantry, they're pretty standard, between 3 and 6 40 mil bases of soldiers, and they typically you want to put as many soldiers as you have wounds, so there's 3 wounds on these. Speed 3, so pretty slow. Brutality 1, Cunning 1, Faith 1, 0 Arcana, and Defense 5. But remember, your defense can be increased by being in a forming column. You can have different weapon options, so musket volley and bayonets, a crossbow volley and bayonets, or a pole weapon thing. So you can actually be melee armed as well if you want. And then a standard or a musician for 5 points each. And then you get a regimental song if you have a musician. For TN5, special faith, remove gore within 5 inches, which is pretty cool. And then you also have skirmishers. They're not an elite choice. Skirmishers may draw a line of sight and move through figures in their own unit. Skirmishers can be modeled on a 20 or 30 mil base. They're just one dude. And they are muskets and hand weapons, or crossbows and hand weapons. They're a bit faster, so speed 4 for your Jaegers, brutality 1, cunning 1, faith 1, defense 5, and 1 wound. And then go to ground is a special skill with cunning. Gain +1 defense against ranged attacks and don't block line of sight, which is pretty cool. And then elite units. All right, here we go. So we've got some sweet, sweet foot knights. They are 10 points each, 15 if you give them muskets. And they're speed 3, brutality 2, cunning 1, faith 2, arcana 0, defense 7, and 1 wound. Defense 7! They have knightly arms, and then they have tough, so they're 5+ endurance saves, and noble. They only ever remove a single figure from nerve tests, which is rad. And then finally, shock troops and elite unit. These guys are awesome. They're kind of like Jaegers, but like a jacked up version of Jaegers. Speed 4, brutality 2, cunning 1, faith 1, arcana 0, defense 6, and 1 wound. They have muskets and hand weapons, and can have grenades for 5 points. Attacks made by units with grenades gain shock 2, and each wound they cause places 2 gore tokens instead of 1. So if you charge them out with grenades, you're 10 points each, but you get crazy amounts of gore going everywhere, and you become shock 2 as well for the nerve test later on. And then battle hardened, you use brutality instead of faith for nerve tests. And assault trooper, close combators gain +1 burst and shock 2 when they charge, which is amazing. So you'd be shock 4 with grenades? Oof. Actually, you already have shock 2, never mind. Your shooting would gain shock 2 as well, because you'd throw them. Cavalry, light cavalry are not, they're not elite, so they're just 5 points each, between 3 and 6 figures. They have cavalry sabers for melee, speed 5, brutality 1, cunning 1, faith 1, arcana, defense 5+, and wounds 1. And you can be dragoons to gain a musket for 5 points, or lancers to gain lances for +1 damage on the charge. Heavy cavalry, so these are the super knights, defense 6. With cavalry sabers, they can be carabiners to have carabiniers, I guess, to have muskets for 5 points, or heavy pistols for +1 damage on the charge for 5 points. And then heavy knights, which are elite, and they've got knightly arms. Heavy lances, they're tough for +1 endurance. They're endurance 7, brutality 2, and then noble, only remove a single guy. And then finally some artillery, and it has its own special rules for firing. When making an attack with an artillery piece, choose a specific figure as the target. Units in close combat may not be selected as a target, however, but you could accidentally hit them. Guess a range and roll a d10. Add the d10 result in inches to the guesses where the shot lands. This roll replaces the normal range combat TN test. If the result of it is a 1, the artillery piece takes 4 wounds and the shot fails because you blow up and they only have 4 wounds. Roll another d10. The shot bounces in a straight line that many inches from where it lands. Measure from the front center of the artillery piece or the barrel, if you've got a barrel. Any figures whose base are crossed by the shot land where it bounces are hit by the attack. And then you fire a gun. Roll damage for each figure individually. Damage is done by individual figures, not the unit. For example, if a skirmisher unit takes 3 wounds, it would generate 3 gore, but only a single figure would be removed as a casualty. If multiple bases of line infantry suffer wounds, the controlling player must consolidate the wounds to remove full bases of figures as possible, but never remove more bases than were directly hit by the artillery shot. And it will stop when it hits specific terrain pieces, so stone walls, buildings, defensive slopes, trench walls, or other terrain features that would look like to stop a cannonball will stop it. And we've got all our weapon stats. Oh, and sorry, and field guns are, they're real good. If you get them a veteran crew, they're 5 extra points. So we're looking at weapons, knightly arms. They're TN6 burst 2, +3 damage, shock 2 on the charge. Cavalry sabers, pretty much the same, but +2 damage. Pole weapons, TN6 burst 3, +3 damage. Bayonets +2, but TN7. Hand weapons, TN6 burst 1 and +2 damage. So the higher the burst, obviously, the more damage you potentially do. The lower the TN, the easier it is to hit with. So like you can see in muskets, they have a 12-inch range. TN6 damage 1, but +2 to the damage roll. Crossbows are burst 3, they're quicker to fire. TN7 though, only +1 damage. And then crossbows that are not a volley, because the line infantry get volleys, the Jaegers don't. They just get regular crossbows because it's not a whole bunch of guys. And then a field gun is guess plus D10. And then burst 3, +5 to injury rolls, and then bounce D10, shock 4. Shock, of course, makes the TN harder for the nerve check when it's done. And you get a bunch of scenarios. So these are designed for 4x4 tables. Sometimes they have wound-based scenarios, different deployments. Oops. So how you deploy. Battle lines, ragged lines, and then we've got 3 scenarios. 5 scenarios here. That's right, it's a D10. So Sacred Ground, Let the Rest the Dead, Showdown, Dwindling Supplies, and Fortified Positions. And then a handy quick reference sheet. So I'm pretty pumped for this. This is a really fun modeling opportunity. The art that Sean made is super inspiring, this mix of like Napoleonics and knights and Jaegers and stuff. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm gonna do a very cool trench war thing. It's gonna be grim and dark and gory. Make lots of Gore tokens, make some cool terrain, and you'll get to see this in the channel soon. So anyway, if you want to check it out today, you can get this in digital or a print copy if you want to wait a little bit, or both as a bundle, I'm pretty sure. And the link is in the video description below. So anyway, big thanks for watching. Big thanks for Sean getting this done, and I'm super proud of him. I think it's a cool accomplishment. I can't wait to play it on the table. And until the next GMG review, I'm Ash. Have a good one. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to support the channel, of course, like and subscribe and hit the little bell below so you get notifications when I post future content. I do post stuff 7 days a week. If you want to support the channel further, you can, of course, buy a t-shirt through Spreadshirts, buy a measuring gauge or objective markers from Death Ray Designs, or, of course, most importantly, there is Patreon. Patreon is what makes all this possible, keeps the lights on, pays for the studio costs, pays for the equipment, model costs, and everything else, and most importantly, puts food in my kids' bellies and a roof over their heads. Big thanks to everyone, past, future, who supported me. I do this stuff because of you guys, and of course, I will continue doing it as long as I can.